Welcome everyone to Read the Book First. This week we're going to be talking about Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. And this week we have Delaney joining us again. I'm excited to talk about this book and my journey reading this book. We're going to talk about the book this week, and then the movie we'll talk about next week. And for folks who have not seen on Instagram, I'm assuming I've posted this in the future. I have started a Patreon where you can go and watch a reading vlog I made while reading this book. And so you can get a more in-depth viewpoint of my initial reactions to the book, to parts of the book specifically, which I'm sure I'll talk about in a few minutes. So click the link in the description, check out the Patreon if you'd like. But anyways, have you read this book before? I forget.
I read this book. I don't remember what year it came out. I'm not like 10 years
2011.
ago. Oh, okay, a little over that. So right after it came out, my mom saw it and bought it for me. And then when she gave it to me, she said, I saw this book and it says it's for peculiar children, so I thought you'd like it. So, okay. Rude, mom. But I did actually like it, so fair enough. But yeah.
It worked
So
out.
I guess like over 10 years ago now, I read the book. So
Mhm.
I remembered a little bit. There were some things I had like an inkling as I'm going along and reading that I was like, oh, I feel like I know where this is going. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
a while ago.
I read this back in like 2013 or 2014, which is right when the second book was coming out. And it was like, because the second book was coming out, this book got popular again. And the movie was coming out around then. I've not seen the movie, so I'm excited to watch that in a couple days. But I remember reading this and enjoying the concept. And at the time I was reading this, I didn't know it was a series or going to be a series. And so once the ending happened and it wasn't like tied up in a nice, neat little bow, I just wanted this to be a standalone. And I remember being very upset about that and then giving this book to Chandler and being like, read this book. And then she got really mad about the ending and said, why did you tell me to read this book? It's going to be a series and I don't want to wait. And I was like, I know, that's how I felt. And now you have to feel that. So it was one of those classic books where I had strong emotions and I made someone else read it to also have those strong emotions.
The series, did you read the other books or?
I have not read any of the books. The series is still going. The fifth one is being published soon, I believe. I
I've
might be
not,
wrong.
I have only read this one, so I've not read
Same.
any of the other.
Yeah. And we'll talk about if I want to continue reading it at the end.
Okay. Yeah.
I listened to this via audiobook, and like I read alongside with the audiobook at points, but and I looked at the pictures because I have the physical book from the library. And so that was an interesting experience. Did you read the physical one, I'm assuming?
I got on Libby, so I read the ebook version of
Gotcha.
it. So it still had the photos and I actually the first time I read it, I had the physical book, but
Hmm.
my mom could not find that when I was visiting this winter, so I just got the ebook.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think, I mean, obviously the pictures are so important to this book. I was curious as if you had listened to it or if I haven't met anyone who's listened to this without the pictures. And I was just curious about that experience. But anyways, this book follows a young 16-year-old Jacob who is uh, unhappy with his life and the world. He's close to his grandpa, who his grandpa has kind of like PTSD-esque stories about these monsters, and his time fighting in World War II. His grandpa passes away. It spears Jacob on a journey to go search for the true history of his grandpa. And along the way, we have these photos, kind of like found footage, documents throughout the book. It's a book about time travel. It's an interesting book and a very fun concept. If you like a little spookiness, if you like a little time travel, if you like found footage, you'll probably like this book. A lot of parts of this book I did like, but I have a mixed bag of feelings about this book. Obviously, spoilers ahead. If you never listened to an episode of my podcast, I should put more spoiler warnings. We're going to spoil everything.
Spoilers ahead.
Spoilers ahead. Oi. Starting off, I don't know if it's because I'm now 31 and Jacob is a 16-year-old boy and I was never a 16-year-old boy, but I could not stand Jacob throughout this whole book. And that might be because of the narrator. I'm not sure.
Like he's a sensitive boy and sometimes he's kind of a little punk.
Yes, yes. And like I don't think we're supposed to like I don't think he's supposed to be that likable at the beginning. Like he's set up to not be like hated, just like he's a teenager having big feelings. And for some very valid reasons, right? Like in
Yeah.
the first chapter, his he witnesses his grandpa dying.
Yeah, that's right. The prologue kind of gives us like the setting
Hmm.
of, you know, sort of like we're introduced to the grandfather,
Hmm.
and then understanding that he had all these stories that as a kid he's, Jacob thought were great, and then he's like, oh my gosh, he's just lying to me, he's just making up this stuff. And so
Hmm.
then we get him, he is a smart aid nepo baby, we find out.
Yes. Yes. Jacob's our Nepo baby. Yes. And he's also a Florida kid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes.
He's
um
set up for success.
yeah, there's like a lot going on where you're just, I mean, yeah, early on we kind of have this feeling like a little bit of an eye roll with a lot of the
Hmm.
description of this kid of like, oh my gosh, your life is not that hard, get over yourself, that sort of feeling.
Yeah. He's like he will one day work at this Smart Aid dynasty, and so right now he's working as a stalker in just his local Smart Aid, and he's being such an asshole and like knocking down diapers trying to get fired, and like the angst is at a 10, and I'm like, bud,
And his,
communicate with your parents.
yes, and his parents are trying. I would also like to note that the first time I read this book, I just remember my memory of it is, oh, the dad is such a nerd. um so the dad is an amateur ornithologist.
Uh-huh.
So I, I had a little reckoning, with this now that I too like birds. And so I had a moment of like, oh, yeah, the dad's a nerd. Well, why was he a nerd again? And then I read about it. It was like, oh, I relate more to the father than the son now. How
Age turns us
embarrassing.
all into birders.
It happens. It's going to happen at some point in your life. You might as well
Mhm.
embrace it.
The other day, I spotted a female cardinal, so it wasn't bright red, and I knew it was a cardinal without Isaac telling me. So, yes, I'm getting turned into a birder. Um, but anyways, the birding aside, we'll talk about the birds
Well,
later.
yes.
Yes.
I'd love to. Let's do it.
I think it's important to know about his Grandpa Abe, that his grandpa was orphaned during the war due to his family living in Poland and being Jewish. And so he's the only person of his family to survive the war. He ended up, um, we, through his stories, we know that he went to kind of like an orphan home, a la like in Chronicles of Narnia, sending kids to the countryside, but this one was in Wales. And he then eventually fought in the war. And so his grandpa is like kind of classic PTSD, where he's like, he lives in America, but he doesn't quite fit in because he still has a strong Polish accent. He's constantly dreaming about the monsters, he tells all these fantastical, spooky stories to Jacob about. And also these kids that he grew up with that had cool, like essentially superpowers. Like they could fly, they could lift heavy stuff. Um, but it's kind of through Jacob's parents, it's kind of at the beginning set like, oh, these monsters were just the Nazis who are also monsters. And let's be clear, Nazis are monsters.
But
uh,
they're human monsters
yes.
versus, these other monsters.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever the other monsters end up being. But so Jacob goes from being like, yes, were fantastical monsters, and then just being like, oh, he's just talking about the Nazis and how awful they were, which also he was talking about that too. Um, and I think it's interesting that the book is set up to have the monsters be like a metaphor for, Nazis and such, but really it ends up spewing it's like yes, and there are other monsters, and I don't think that's a bad thing, especially for where the story ends up going. I don't know, it's an interesting choice, I think.
Think, and maybe we'll get into this later, because there is a little bit of this book that's kind of saying that like it is a metaphor, but also, I mean, I guess it's kind of saying like serial killers and Nazis are these creatures rather than human monsters, which they
Yeah.
actually are. And I didn't really, I don't know if I liked that part because it almost is like, well, yeah, you know, this behavior is explained because they're monsters or they're feeding the monsters or whatever it is. But in
Hmm.
reality, no, those are just human monsters, and humans are capable of atrocities, and
Yes.
they don't have to be fantastical creatures. So, yeah, that was
Yeah.
an like I get it, but there's also a little bit that bothered me. I think about that of like, no, those are human monsters.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like I think Jeffrey Dahmer gets mentioned at one
Yes.
point, and there's just like a little part of me that felt maybe a bit uncomfortable with this idea that we're explaining this behavior with this you know this
Yeah.
type of monster.
No, I agree, definitely. Yeah, so we have Jacob who is dealing with his teenage angst. Also, we get so much information about his like shitty like redneck punk friend. And I'm like, we don't care about this side character. He's barely important to the plot. There's so much detail in the ch first chapter or two about him. And I'm like, he if he doesn't come back in the later books, what was the point?
It's a long first chapter, a lot
Hmm.
happens,
Yeah.
and there's a lot going on.
Yeah. So Jacob is trying to get fired, and then his grandpa calls him and is freaking out that the monsters are coming for him. He's asking for his key repeatedly, and he tells Jacob to cut out their tongues and stab their eyes, which I'm like, "Eee, okay." Um, and so he rushes to his grandpa's house, whose grandpa's like, here's my thing. Okay, if his family I'm so mad at his family and how they deal with the grandpa, right? Like, I know, like, we find out the grandpa and Jacob's dad had a hard father-son relationship. That's very fair, especially when we find out why, etc. But if you know that your aging father is dealing with things that you believe are not real, whether or not he believes them around, right? Yet he's not saying that he needs to be put in a home, which is what they want to do, but they let him live by himself. I was like, at least get like a home aide or you have him live with you. Like, I don't know. It because they have money, it just made me like upset. I'm like, why aren't you taking care of him? I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a little bit like you recognize, I mean, obviously we find out that he is not experiencing any of, I mean, this is all real, but at this time we're assuming that maybe he's got dementia and
Hmm.
some kind of PTSD, like a mixture of things going on. And so it does seem a bit messed up to just say, grandpa's probably fine on his own. We'll just like lock up the guns, whatever. No
Yeah.
worries.
Yeah. It was just it seems so heartless and irresponsible. And Jacob runs to his grandpa and his friend's there too, because his friend gave him a ride. I'm like, is that the only purpose? I don't know. Anyways, the house is like ransacked. His grandpa's not there. The screen door has been slashed, and it leads out into like the foresty, wooded area. And he finds his grandpa face down, still alive, but like beat up. And so he's trying to help his grandpa, like turns him around and trying to help him. And he finds a bloody letter, in his hand. And his grandpa tells Jacob to go to the island and find the bird in a loop on the other side of the old man's grave, September 3rd, 1940. Emerson letter. Like, it's just so many directions really fast. And then Ricky, his friend, is like freaking out, but then and doesn't see this, but Jacob sees this monster that's like very like he has like tentacles coming out of his mouth and he doesn't have like eyes are blacked out and it's just like nightmare walking nightmare that like almost attacks him but then ends up running away.
And that's how we end things with that,
Yeah.
basically.
And then his dad and then his grandpa dies.
Yeah. And his grandpa's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this chapter minus the like angsty teenage boy stuff and minus the excessive details of his best friend, supposedly. This first chapter is a great start to the book. I think the first line is really good. I had just come to accept that my life would be ordinary when extraordinary things began to happen. Like, I think that's a great first line. I think it's a really strong start to the book. I think part of the reason I had such a mixed bag feelings about this book is I don't love the writing style. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting in the way that, I mean, there's a lot of little Easter egg things and a lot of foreshadowing, and when I've gone back, so reading it a second time, I picked up on more than, of course, the first time I read it. But sometimes the descriptions are too much. Sometimes I like the descriptions, like
Hmm.
a lot of good imagery, but also sometimes I just get to the point, like just give me the
Yeah.
information I need. I don't need this much description of whatever this is. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like the right, and there are like sections I agree that are like really beautiful. I think it's just very inconsistent writing, and this is Ransom Riggs' first novel. So I think maybe that part of it is just because it's his first foray into this. Chapter two, Jacob is going through it. The cops don't believe him. His parents don't believe him. He is super depressed, reasonably so. He just watched his grandfather die. He is forced to go see this psychiatrist who puts him on a lot of medicine, which then makes him like gain weight and makes him not feel like himself. And he just kind of is having a miserable time. And yes, the misery he's feeling is understandable, and I would also be going through similar emotions. But the way it's expressed in the book, I could just not get, I'm like, I could not deal with the angst and the like his disdain for the world. It
it,
was so hard for me.
I was not an angsty teenager, really. I mean, I had moments, of course, like any teenager, but I think it's always hard for me, the like I didn't listen to very angsty music or like really any of that. So it is hard for me to relate because there's a little bit that I still look at like, your family has money. I know your grandfather just died, but like, you know,
Yeah.
things aren't that bad overall. It's just really bad right now with the grandfather's death.
Yeah.
But overall, like, you're okay. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
I I think if there was two people in this world that were absolutely not angsty teens, it's you and I.
Yeah.
Yes, it checks out. Eventually Jacob starts to like recover, kind of. He starts lying to his therapist, being like, I'm not having dreams anymore. And his therapist is like, not just like, it's okay if you have nightmares, but like, he's like, tell me about these nightmares. He doesn't like say what you're believing is true, like the monsters are real. He's saying, he's actually acting like a psychiatrist. He's like, this is what you are feeling about your grief, and it is turning into this, right? So I thought that was interesting.
Is acting, I guess, professionally, but then also I thought it was a little bit weird. I think this is the chapter where he really keeps pushing about like the meaning of the words that his grandfather
Yeah,
said. I think this is the right chapter.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
He's really pushing about the meaning of the words that he said. He's like, well, what could that mean? What is that related to? And there was a little part of my brain reading that just thought, well, that's a little odd.
Hmm.
It seems like we're missing the point here. Like, you're trying to help him get over this and work through the death, and you're really making him circle back to these details that are probably traumatic and maybe triggering in some way. Why are we doing that?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely, and Jacob doesn't pick up on it, and neither do his parents. His mom's just like an absent businesswoman, which like, girl, get your bag, but also, uh, your poor son and husband are both wildly depressed and stuck in ruts. Sure, her son is a teenager, that's part of being a teenager sometimes, but I'm like, your husband also needs kind of a kick in his metaphorical pants, you know. But
The same time, I also do feel for her in some ways because
oh,
she like comes
absolutely.
home and she's got this depressed teenager and she's got her depressed bird nerd husband that can't publish a book or whatever. He can't finish a
Hmm.
project. And
Hmm.
she's I mean, it's obviously the wealth is coming from her family as a whole, but she's working. She's a corporate girly. And
Yeah.
so she just comes home and she just wants to have some peace in her household and she's got these two boys.
Hmm. And so when Jacob's like, "Hey, Dad, what if we went to Wales and you went birding, and then we both got what we wanted, and I wouldn't have to work at my uncle's Rite Aid corporation, and you could look at birds that are apparently super cool, and then I could also do this mystery stuff because I went into Grandpa's letters and I found this stuff." And as soon as his dad is like, "Yeah, birds," his mom's like, "Yes, birds, go, leave the house."
Is I beg of you. I would also like to. I recorded a few quotes here that I really liked. He's talking about like, okay, I need to convince my dad. There's this unique bird habitat that gives him a total ornithology boner,
Oh yeah.
and I just was like, it's such a teenage boy thing to say,
Hmm.
and also it stuck with me obviously. I said, "What is this bird?" That was my note. So, what is this bird? I
Yeah.
want to know.
Did they ever say what kind of bird the ones that they end up going to see?
I don't know if it's this specific one, but he did get excited about a Manx shearwater. I think
Mm.
I'm not sure if that's how you say it. Manx Manx shearwater. It is a real bird. I looked it up,
I don't
so
know
maybe
European
that's
birds.
it. It nests on islands,
Okay.
like like ocean,
Yeah.
kind of rough habitat. So yeah, islands, which makes sense for where they're going. But I did look it up, and I don't know if it's as far as like European birding. I don't know how exciting it is. I did see sooty shearwaters this past summer, and that was exciting for me. So
Maybe similar.
maybe similar. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, birds. This is this book. I mean, I know Peregrine is in the title, but like when I was rereading this, I was like, every time birds came up, I was like, God damn, why are birds in my life always?
Cannot escape the birds. No. And you thought it was just your partner that's into birds, and now all your friends are getting into birds, and so you might as well just accept the cult.
Yes, I wish I was thinking about this the other day because I went birding with my friends without Isaac. I was just along for the ride. Literally, we're in the car and then we walked a bit. Anyways, we saw an eagle. They freaked out. I mean,
Really.
eagles here are like very rare, but in my head, I was like, one ate my cat once.
R.I.P.
Anyways,
I
I was I was thinking about I was like, what I should have done when I first moved over here to Virginia is start an eBird account, and then anytime they make their lists, I should just have them tag me and so see how many birds I passively have seen, though I don't know what they look like, minus, the ones we see all the time. And I wish I would have done that because I bet it was a lot of really cool birds.
eBird account,
I don't. I need to make one. I
so
should.
you could make one, and then you can go back. You can't do it from the app, I don't think, but you can go back online and then add
Hmm,
people to the list. Just a
maybe.
thought.
Maybe. Isaac doesn't really use the eBird list unless we're going out like on a big day or something. He doesn't really use it. But my friends Marissa and Sarah are like birders.
Chasing those numbers. I
Yeah.
started tracking a couple years ago now,
Hmm.
which unfortunately I did not track on that road trip that we did through so much different excellent bird habitat. But I am over 200 for my life list right
Nice.
now. It's not a
Nice.
very big number for any birders, but
Mine's
I'm
at
proud.
0. Anyways, less
Anyhow,
about birds. They go
yes,
to Wales, and so the chapter 3 starts as they're on the ferry, going on to Wales, and them on the ferry description. I was like, "This is catch a can, woohoo!"
I literally have this noted. I love the description of the island and the town, and it felt very catch can. Yeah.
Hmm. And chapter 3, when they finally get to Wales, it's a small, cloudy, like rainy Wales island. I this is where my audiobook really pissed me off. The narrator, like, to be clear, I cannot do any sort of British accents or Welsh accents. So like the narrator's doing better than I am. But I know Welsh accents. I have seen so much Love Island. I know a Welsh accent. And this narrator was doing like Northern British, like Southern Scotland, Northern England, Southern Scotland accents, like almost scout. Like it was not a Welsh accent. And it was so frustrating. And like eventually when we meet the actual peculiar kids, they all have different accents, which is fine because they're from all over the world. No problem with that at all. I'm just problem I have is with these supposedly Welsh fishermen. I was like, they sound like they're from like almost Liverpool. I'm like, this is not the Beatles. Look at a map.
Is a bit of a gamble if you're going to do an audiobook and then read it in an accent. I will say I have stopped reading books before because of like actual physical books because of accents done where it makes it almost where you can't read it.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand why it's important sometimes. And then also sometimes, just tell me it's a country accent or that,
Yeah.
and I can picture it. I don't need it.
Yeah. From here until the end, I was just really frustrated with the audiobook, which I will say it did give me a bit of a bias of like not enjoying it as much as I probably would have. But I just want to say, if you're listening to this on audiobook, don't unless you really want to. They get to the island. They're passing like shipwrecked boats from World War II. All the like residents are like super unhelpful, which I find hilarious. They're just all grumpy. They probably haven't had any sunshine for the last 100 days. It's fine. We understand. They stay at this little tiny like it's like a pub that has a few rooms. It's called the Priest Hole because when the Catholic priests were getting hunted, they would hide. And I'm like, this is giving Creek Street.
It was like Creek Street, and then also I was thinking hole in the wall
Yep.
combo. Yeah,
Hmm.
priest hole.
Yeah. Yeah. The Priest Hole. They go scouting for the birds, and his dad is like thrilled about these birds. So apparently they're cool.
I would like more information about the specific species, but it's
Mhm.
fine. I just want to look them up. But I do
Yeah.
like how he uses birding to babysit his dad, basically, or to get his dad to do stuff, and which it's worked on me before. I'll be honest. I have. It's like, oh, but there probably gonna be good birds there. I'm like, all right, fine, yes.
Fine, I'll
So I get
go.
it. I get
Yes.
it. Again, more relatable to the dad than yeah. I hate it, but here we are. So.
Jacob befriends kind of some local teenagers who he's like, "Hey, can you take me to this old house, the old orphan house in the middle of the marsh?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then they trick him and take him to an old like farmer's shed where there's a bunch of sheep poop, and they push him into the sheep poop.
In turn of events, Dirty D and Worm are not the most trustworthy fellows.
Yes. And they're like also are really into rap and like I I'm just picturing, and like I might be wrong, but I'm picturing these kids to be white boys from the small Welsh island. And I'm like, your inclination to go ahead and become the best rapper ever is a really weird one, bud.
It's a little cringe,
A little.
the whole description and just their whole thing. Again, just with the maybe not so much even angst, but it's still just a little bit of that where I just wanted to get through it. I
But
hated
we all
it.
went to high school with these
Of
folks.
course.
Hmm.
We've met him.
Yes.
We know Dirty
Yes.
D and Worm.
Yep. Yes. But I wouldn't let them bring me nowhere.
No.
And that's on Jacob, being a rich kid from Florida. But he does end up finding the abandoned house and he goes in and it's surrounded by nature and it's empty. Part of the house is destroyed. He sees some old like does he find the pictures here? No.
next chapter.
Okay.
This one, I believe he just explores a little bit and is really disappointed with what he's
Yeah.
finding. And it's like, there's nothing here. Like, I come
Yeah.
all this way and there's just nothing. And he just kind of gives up.
Yeah. His grandpa had some pictures of these kids, and these are like old vintage photos that are like old school styled photoshopped where kids are floating, kids are super strong, invisible, all these kind of things. And these photos in the book are actual photos that Ransom Riggs collected over the years, or some of his friends in the vintage photography collecting world have collected. And so it's very obvious as the book goes on, especially from here on, that he's using these photos to directly plot out what happens in the book. And most of the time, it works. But later on, there's some times where we're just like, it's like a random afternoon, and I'm like, what's going on? And then suddenly we get a picture of what's going on. I'm like, oh, he just wanted to include this picture. So he wrote a like vignette about this scene.
There is some of that with, and you read that at the end of the book. Oh, by the way, these are all actually real photos, which there is part of me just like, why do these exist? But there's some really weird ones. But there's also some photos in there, and maybe they're just the first batch, or but there's some photos where I don't think we ever actually get a story or information, like the twins. We
The
never
twins,
find. Or,
we meet them.
oh, those are the ones that are in the weird little alpha. Or the oh, okay,
Hmm.
we did meet them then, but they don't really have a lot.
Not
No,
much. Yeah.
okay.
It's most of the photos are just like side characters, and there's obviously are a few main ones that we actually interact with via Jacob, but most of them are just like, and he's here, and look at him, he's bees.
So we get a little bit of information about. I still think there's a couple that we don't really find out much about, and then it seems like they just wanted to include the
Yeah.
picture. And I mean, it's fine. It is a cool premise. But I,
Hmm.
I agree. There's definitely some things that probably don't do anything for the plot, that it feels like, oh, I have this cool photo. How do I include it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really fun idea. I think it's really creative. Would I base a whole YA 5+ book series on it? I don't know. And some of those later books are thick, like 500 pages. Yeah. And I mean, sure, maybe like 70 of them are photos, but
That's a lot of photos. And again, why are there so many weird photos like this that are just
I mean,
out there?
it's an old hobby back when cameras first came out. My friend's grandma used to do this, and like not in the like with creepy stranger kids or kids in the circus. Like she would develop pictures in her bathroom, and then she would like cross develop them, or she would, do some really precise cutting and pasting so that there was like five of her in a picture, like so it was just like a fun like hobby, and like it was really popular for a while, especially within like the circus and con man world.
So I guess, we do a lot of weird stuff with
Hmm.
Photoshop. So this is just that, but
Yeah,
the original version.
yeah. So it's interesting, but it's, still it is a lot to base off a book series on. But um Jacob goes back to the pub, talks to his dad. His dad here is the first time we find out how his grandpa was not a good father, partially because he was dealing with a bunch of PTSD, but also because he kept leaving for work trips and not being emotionally available to Jacob's dad. But then Jacob's dad has this line where he's like, but it all changed by the time you were born, because by the time you were born, he had moved past enough of his trauma essentially to become a grandfather. So his dad kind of is like vulnerable in this moment, which I liked this moment. I think it's a interesting thing to have conversation so early in this book, um, about like about he's like, hey, I have issues with my dad. I don't grieve your grandpa in the same way you grieve him because I didn't have the same version of him, and I'm kind of jealous that you did. And I just think it's a really interesting conversation to have in this YA book.
I think it's very vulnerable, and I think it does. give us a little bit more empathy for the father, where it's not just like he's this jerk that doesn't like his dad.
Yeah.
It does give more context for their relationship, and then also for Jacob's relationship. And then I know another part in there too is that the dad, part of his opinion of his father was that he thought his dad was cheating on their
Hmm.
mom.
Hmm.
And so of course, that also alters his relationship because he thinks, oh, this, my dad's out here running around on trips and he's got another woman. And so
Hmm.
we can maybe appreciate where the dad's coming from a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And then after like this this conversation, the next day his dad's like, okay, we can go and look more information about what you want here. Like I can back out off the birds for a bit and more into this history. And so they go into the like local museum where they have this guy who has the old bog man, which is one of those like petrified bodies that fell in the bog. They're so cool and so creepy and so gross. Um, and we also find out that the orphan house, was destroyed in an air raid during World War II. And he talks about how they all and go see this old man whose name is Augie, who's 83. We find out that the bombing happened on September 3rd, 1940, which is that day that his grandpa told him. Um, and then later that night, Jacob wakes up to see a peregrine falcon watching him in the window. I would be terrified.
Yes. So in this scene, I definitely thought of you because, it might as well be a raven. Um Thought, oh, Janessa is going to hate this part.
Yes.
The part with Augie.
Hmm.
So he tells Jacob that there was one of the kids that survived
Oh
from
yeah.
the home. And so we're kind of assuming at this point that that's his grandfather that
Yeah.
survived. So that
Yeah.
that was kind of a big part in there.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, back to the peregrine in the
The peregrine falcon in your
room.
window, and he's so calm about it. There's no reason for him to dream about a peregrine falcon, let alone other birds. You know, like I don't know. Falcons also, from my knowledge, they don't hang out close to humans on purpose.
Really, I mean, I haven't seen that many, but
Yeah.
generally, I don't think they're curious. It's not like a pigeon that's looking
Yeah.
for a handout.
Yeah. It's not a sky rat.
Poor
Yeah.
pigeons.
Yeah. Whatever. They're fine.
We rescued one over the summer.
Yeah.
Well, Eric did. It was drowning, and I mean, what are you gonna do? It's
Yeah.
like drowning. So he climbed down to the grid and had to like. There was just enough water on the grid. He waded over and picked it up, and then we had an injured pigeon, and so I told him like you can't bring that inside,
Yeah.
and which he agreed because
Yeah.
but then I find myself doing first aid for a pigeon, and we put it in a box and let it rest away from predators, and it did eventually fly off. So
There you go. Out here changing pigeon lives.
I just feel bad for a man, they're
Yeah.
just
I mean, that's fair. If it was drowning, yes, yes. I just, in general, they gross me
yes.
out. Get with the birds.
More birds.
Jacob goes back to the house to investigate. This time he goes upstairs and he says that he could feel being watched. Um, and he finds a bed and lays down on it and imagines it's his grandpa's bed. And he finds an old trunk, and this is where he finds all the photos. So he finds more photos with some of the similar kids that were in the photos his grandpa collected. And then he goes down to the basement and finds because he like drops the photos or something like that.
Trunk to open it, I think, because
Yeah.
it was locked. So I think he drops the trunk through the hole in the floor, and
Ah,
that was how he was able to bust it open. So he had to go down to the creepy basement to get the
yeah.
photos.
Which is it is full of jars. And like I, that's where I turn around. Like I was thinking about this, and like I could deal with going through a marsh. I've been to a fair share of old abandoned buildings and woods. between Alaska, Montana, and here, you know. But once I see jars of stuff, I'm gone. I'm out.
It was giving American Horror Story a little
Yes.
bit, but also parts of the house remind me of the cannery, you know,
Uh-huh.
the
Yep.
haunted cannery,
Yes. Uh,
which brought us together.
the beloved cannery that
Yes,
somehow we didn't get injured at,
surprisingly, but yes,
surprisingly.
but yeah, the like safety hazards and all the old stuff, and yes, that was
Hmm.
definitely reminiscent of that. But yeah, so that
Yeah.
was how he ended up with the photos because he had dropped the trunk, collects them down in a creepy basement.
Hmm. And then he hears footsteps above him and he hears, Abe, is that you? And then dozens of kids from the photos pop out and he sees them. And then they run and he chases them. It chases one, specifically a girl into the bog and follows her into a cairn tunnel. And a cairn is like, it's spelled Cairn, I believe, right? But pronounced almost like Karen, a cairn.
But yes.
And it's just kind of like a cave system, right? I'm gonna Google this.
Isn't that word used for like trail markers? Or am I thinking of a different?
Dictionary.com says it's a mound of rock stones built as a memorial or landmark. Yeah, so like stacks of rocks, which is this is what I'm more familiar with, like in Scotland, a la Outlander. It's also apparently a small terrier breed.
But it's being used to describe as a cave, or is it saying the marker for the cave?
It's always pronounced. It's always like it keeps being referenced to as the Cairn Tunnel. So I think it's just like a tunnel system that is marked by a cairn.
Or there's some kind of feature to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, he goes into this cairn tunnel of sorts, and when he gets out the other side, suddenly it's sunny. There's no mud. There's also no cars, just horses, and he's walking towards town, and there's people staring at him. He gets to the pub and he's like about to go upstairs to their room, but then the people at the bar are like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you in these weird clothes? Are you a witch?" kind of vibe. Or are you a spy, I guess, because it's the 40s. He gets chased through the city because they want to like kill him for being a spy,
I
supposedly. Yeah. But then he gets grabbed by a girl and saved. We find out this is a girl named Emma. We also find out that it's September 3rd, 1940. And then there's also a boy named Millard who was there, and Millard is the invisible boy from his grandpa's pictures. They're able to escape town and they bring Jacob along as the Nazis fly over to start bombing the island. And then also Emma lights the pub on fire for fun, and she can start fire from her hand. Um, and then they start talking about a loop, and that's like the end of that chapter. And so here we have like finally some like stuff is finally happening 5 chapters in.
chapters in, we finally are starting to understand something.
Yes. They get to the house and we find out that Miss Peregrine, it's like the house is not destroyed. It's sunny. Something magical's happening. Miss Peregrine is there, and we find out she knows of Jacob. And so Jacob delivers the news of his grandpa's death. And we kind of get like a lot of like lore dump in this section about the peculiars. We finally meet all these peculiar children. Um, but we find out that there's peculiars all over the world. And different cultures are they're called different things, but they're essentially kids that have special powers. And often the peculiars do not their kids aren't peculiar, their kids are normal, but it's kind of like supposedly twins, skips a generation. It's kind of similar to that. Um, we also find out that Miss Peregrine is a inbrin, yes, an inbrin, which is spelled very Welsh, Ymbrynes.
In Britain. Yeah.
Inbrin. And all the inbrins are essentially these ladies um who are in charge of caretaking peculiars and making sure they're safe. And they also are also all birds.
Birds that can time travel and make
Mhm.
loops of time,
Yes.
like most birds.
Yes. Yeah. And so some of the inbreds we find out different names. We have obviously Peregrine. We have Avocet, a nightjar, finch, a thrush, a kestrel, a wren, a gannet, and a tree creeper. But
One Miss Tree Creeper.
right? Yeah,
We
it's
have
just
brown creepers here. That's
mhm.
I feel bad for them with that name. I don't know. It
Yeah,
just
yeah.
seems
We have those here too.
yeah.
But as soon as I was like, okay, so all these women are birds and birds can time travel, and so suddenly me thinking birds are creepy is not so weird.
Well, yes. Time traveling birds are
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, and then important bird note. On page 155, there's this picture of this old lady holding a bird, and it's supposedly Mrs. Finch and Mrs. Finch, right? I asked my friend Marissa, who got her PhD studying house finches. I was like, "Is this bird in this picture a finch?" And she said, "No. It's probably, I think she said either a thrush or a swallow." But she did say that the bird looks really grumpy and angry and sick because she studied sick birds specifically. So she's like, "I know a sick bird, and that's a sick bird." Um, so I just want the record to state that I thought that was big for a finch because I know what finches look like because they caught finches in our yard for the research. And I watched from my window. I was bird watching the watchers. Um, and finches are so much smaller than that.
I agree. I remember looking at that and thinking that that maybe wasn't quite right. But also, again, I don't know European birds,
Hmm.
so I couldn't make an educated assumption on that. But I agree. I looked at that and I remember noting it like I should probably look this up to see, and
Hmm.
I'm glad you did.
Yes, yes. I was like, this does not seem accurate for my very limited bird knowledge.
Yes.
Um, but all that aside, Jacob is like oddly okay with all of this happening because part of him is like, my grandpa is vindicated, like he wasn't crazy. I can believe in his stories again. Like that part of his relationship is resol like t put back together. But then he's also like, what's going on in the world? Like these people knew my grandpa when he was a kid.
How is this possible?
Hmm.
There's it gives us more questions than answers. But yes, in a lot of ways it does I think help him with his grieving process. Like, oh, now I found out the truth, kind of some of the truth of my
Yeah,
grandfather, and it is like a relief,
yeah,
in that sense.
yeah. He stays for dinner, and during dinner is the air raid. The kids go and they like watch the air raid and start singing this really creepy song. But as the bombs are being dropped is when the time loop resets, and so we find out that each day these kids are stuck in this time loop. Um, and we find out more about time loops later, but we can assume that if this loop didn't exist, they would have been destroyed by the bomb because bombs. Um, he gets Jacob then is led back to the cairn to go back to his timeline, and he gets back to the hotel, and his dad like questions him a lot, and then he's like, "You need to go call your therapist," which is such a weird parenting move.
It's like I can't figure out how to deal with you, so you need to talk to
Yeah.
your therapist because this is above my pay grade as a
Uh-huh.
father.
Yeah, and this is where I wrote down, I was like, this therapist, like I didn't remember all of the bits and pieces of this book rereading it, but I started reading this, I'm like, the therapist ain't good. I don't know what's going on with this therapist, but he ain't good.
Had the early thing that sort of triggered a, ooh, I don't know, he's weirdly into these details. Why
Hmm.
would they matter if he's just like his job is just to help this kid through the grieving process? But yes, I remember thinking because we find out that the therapist
He's like
is he
picking up his sister or something at the airport is what he
okay,
says.
yes. And I remember making a note of like, I don't trust that. Like
Hmm.
that's weird. Why would he answer what? No.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suspicious.
Yeah. It's definitely weird. Um the next day, Jacob goes back to the house. The kids put on a talent show for him. Um, and here's where I started thinking about these kids. So these kids have been in this time loop for 50 plus years at this point, like 60 years, right? Almost 70. I'm doing math on
No,
the
it's
spot.
like 70 years,
Yeah.
almost 70 years. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
Like 70 years. These kids are Miss Peregrine is their teacher, is their enforcer, is their mother. What kind of hell is she stuck in?
Truly.
Like I know we put the Madeline we were talking about, poor Miss Clavel. Nah, she's got it
No,
easy. Those kids grow up. Poor Miss Peregrine.
Peregrine. Not only does
And
she have all these kids, but then they've got all these like little weird things that she has to worry about. A
yeah,
child floating away?
yeah,
No.
yeah. And she's in charge of the magic to make sure that the loop keeps going. And so if she doesn't, they die.
Way
Like
too much responsibility.
poor Miss Peregrine. Like, who cares if she's a bird? That's too much responsibility for any bird.
He is magical, but no, too much.
Yeah. So that like one made me confused. And then another thing, these kids are acting like children. And like they each day they do different activities. They have some sort of schooling program. They work on their gifts, etc. So it's not like so they are developing skills, but they're also being reset. And but they have memory, whereas the townspeople don't have memory of the day before, whereas the kids do. And so I'm like, okay, they can remember every single day for the last 70 years. So mentally they should all be in their 70s, though physically they're not. But yet, and the kids act like children slash teenagers. Like they're immature and just the basic definition of immature. They just are not mature. And that is creepy and I don't like it.
Like, I mean, I understand why like, they can exist and not have the reset because they're different than the normal townspeople. So that makes sense. I guess you could say that these kids, the reason that they're not developing mentally, I mean, their bodies are not aging, right? So
Hmm.
like the parts of their brains that are in theory should be making those connections and things, like, I mean, their brains
Yeah.
aren't aging. So I
Yeah.
guess, but then also at the same time, if they're able to develop the skills and
Yeah. Right? It's
yeah,
like it doesn't make sense. And like obviously any time travel book is not going to make sense. That's the issue with time travel, right?
the science isn't going to science because it's
Yes.
not science.
But like I don't necessarily need the science to science. I just need it to like make basic sense. Especially because Emma starts flirting with Jacob, the known grandson of Abe, and we know that they had a relationship because of the letters. And when it first happens, Jacob's even like, I know I look like my grandpa, and I bet she's acting like this because I look like my grandpa. And he like makes a comment. He's like, if I was a hornier teen, I would act on it. Like he makes some weird comment like that. And it's just like, I don't like it.
Because
It's yes,
she knows everything and he knows enough that to know that there might have been something, and it's a little icky,
it's
just
icky.
a little bit.
It's icky.
Yeah,
It's like it's icky. Yes, it's
yeah.
gross. And she takes him to go swimming and it's like, take off your pants. And I'm like, again, icky. You've known this boy for less than 3 hours.
It's his grandson. Like, he's not a stranger,
Yeah. Hmm.
like that could be his potential grandmother. Yeah. I
It's not
don't
good.
I don't like it. I do really love Horace though.
Yes.
Um because in the scene when they're swimming, they're making fun of his clothes.
Hmm.
And I love Horace so much for this. And this was the quote that I love because he's talking about, like, I know you're making fun of me, but it's not my fault. I'm fashionable. Like, you guys look like trolls. But he says, go ahead, have a laugh at old Horace's expense. Call me a dandy if you will. But just because the villagers won't remember what you wear doesn't give you license to dress like a vagabond. Like, Horace, I love you.
Oh, this is
Yes.
great. I forget, what's his
He
power?
has prophetic dreams. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, or nightmares, maybe rather.
Hmm.
But yeah, he can see the future through his dreams.
Yeah, because he keeps dreaming of like explosions.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. Jacob ends up going back to his timeline and to the pub where he is immediately interrogated by all the farmers and his dad for potentially killing the sheep. All the sheep have been killed, and they're like, it's the American kid. And I'm like, you haven't talked to this rich boy.
Capable of killing sheep.
No.
We just know
No.
he's not. He's
Also, look at that rap duo you got.
way more suspicious. But also
Mhm.
the descriptions of some of the stuff and how many of the sheep are killed, like it's suspicious again.
Hmm.
It's just a little mental note of like, oh,
Hmm.
there's something. We don't know
Yeah.
what, but there's something. Also in this chapter, just as a note, because I think it comes up later, Jacob does tell the older kids about things from the future.
Oh, yes. He takes pictures of them with his phone. Yeah.
And like I think shows them stuff and just like gives them information about his time
Hmm.
that maybe we don't know how this affects things, but just as a note,
Yeah.
that was something when they were all hanging out. So
Yeah. I really like this part. He takes an apple from the 1940s to his timeline, and in the morning, it's like beyond rotten.
that was an amazing way to tell
Yeah.
us some information.
Yes. And it's the show don't tell. And sometimes this book does too much telling and needs to be
Yes.
more showing. For how visual this book is trying to be, I'm like, we get it. The next day, Jacob goes back to the home, and Miss Peregrine is upset because of how much Jacob told the kids about the 21st century and technology. And she's like, yeah, the kids are gonna die in your current timeline. So you need to stop talking about that and the other dangers. And he understands. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. My bad. But also, you didn't tell me, which also true. You didn't tell him.
Can't be that mad at him because you're withholding information.
Hmm. Yeah. And then we meet Enoch, and Enoch is a creep.
He's a weird little kid, really weird.
And if you had a bunch of kids who were stuck in a time loop from the 1940s, I expect them all to end up like Enoch. Yeah, only one of them is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
little Dr. Frankenstein
Yeah.
vibe, like.
He can move life from one thing to another. So he animates his toys via like chicken hearts and sheep hearts and stuff.
Which explains all of the organs in the basement.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and then he's like, you have questions. I can't answer them, but like go upstairs. There's a room and there's a key on the ledge. And I'm like, Jacob, you fell for those other teenagers pushing in cheap shit. And now you're falling for this bitch's plan. What are you doing, bud?
This kid, like, you want to take advice from this child that's like has undead toys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Um, but of course, Jacob goes up into the locked room and sees that there's a dead child in bed. And we find out this is a child named Victor, who is one of the twins. And we also find out that Enoch can turn him back alive because his Victor's twin sister, yeah, comes in the room and it's like, can you turn him back alive? We haven't talked to him in a long time. I miss him. And I'm like, this poor girl, like, why aren't they burying him? It's just, it's weird. And it's just creepy. And then we find out that some of the kids do this game called Raid the Village, where they just go and terrorize the villagers.
Bored, it. Kids will be kids, you know what I mean?
I mean, we were bored kids once on an island that was rainy. I never felt I needed to raided a village.
You didn't need
Sure,
to terrorize the townspeople, but
no.
also you were not trapped on the same day for 70 years, so I can't judge. That's all I'm saying.
I
We
just
listen and we do not judge.
okay. I will judge. And I won't listen. No, I can't. I don't have good hearing. Um, um, anyways, Jacob ends up in Emma's room and starts snooping in her like organized file of letters and finds love letters from his grandpa to her and vice versa. Um, but the last letter comes to Emma from his grandpa. It's from 1963, and it's just a photo of his grandpa and a baby who he realizes as his father or maybe his aunt, um, and says, "This is why." This is where he has that like moment of like, "Oh, Emma is flirting with me because of my grandpa," and I'm like,
Yeah.
she saved these letters for 70 years.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like she's not going to forget who your grandfather is. And
yeah.
yeah, it just makes it weird.
It's weird and it's creepy. If I have Jacob's timeline, Jacob talks to his dad, and his dad is complaining about how a random other birder appeared and how he was like, now my special birds aren't going to be special birds.
I got the scoop on this place, of course, like in
Yeah.
in the year 2011, 10, whatever we're in.
Hmm.
I'm the first one to be documenting these birds. Like, get over yourself.
In Wales, in the British Isles,
Yeah.
bud.
An American coming over here. No, this
No.
is so, yeah,
Yeah. And also this strange man also orders two raw steaks from the restaurant.
weird. Very
Hmm.
strange.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yes. That night, Jacob goes to sneak to talk to Emma, and he sees a man watching him with binoculars. Creepy.
Not normal. And I think
So
does he recognize it as the birder that had just been in there?
he's assuming it's the birder um because of the binoculars.
Okay, maybe other people could have binoculars. I don't know.
I mean, the other people in my life that have binoculars that are not birders are like my dad and my uncle who watch boats go by their house.
Gonna say my dad has a pair to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or to whale watch.
Yeah. Although he has been getting into birds,
Nice.
it's contagious.
It's taken years, but I'm not getting the itch. I just know more.
The first step.
Yeah. Knowledge is power or whatever. Um, yeah,
Back to
so
bird.
Emma and Jacob are on the beach. Um, and she rows them out on a rowboat out to this sunken warship and then makes him swim down under into a secret room where they have like an air tube that works. And I'm like, how is this? It's just like common sense. I know they're teenagers, but like if there is anything sunken, you do not go into it unless you have flippers and radio and lights. Like
Like diving in general has its dangers. Diving into shipwrecks. I
at
mean, that's
night.
basically at night. That's basically like cave diving.
Yeah.
It's I know. I was stressed the whole
Yeah.
paragraph.
Yeah. And then they see like pretty fish or whatever that are supposed to look to the sky. And I'm like, you know what you could see instead? The stars on mainland.
Wild.
Yeah. Then at one point during this scene, they kiss, and Jacob describes Emma as a siren. And the whole time he's like, I know if she makes one more move towards me, it's gonna be kissing time, and I should move my body away so she gets the message. But he doesn't. But he describes knowing that he should,
I
and
hate
that
it.
is disgusting.
I do. I hate it so much. And just like it's just bad enough that you're kissing your would-be grandmother,
Hmm.
but also just like, I don't know, teenagers, because you just know it's gonna be bad.
It's just bad.
Ugh. The whole
And
thing.
and obviously, okay, there's no new kids coming to this island or to her, right? Do you think the last person she kissed was his grandpa? Disgusting. But we find out here that common people cannot travel into time loops and that Abe could see the monsters and that's what made him peculiar. And this is where Jacob connects the dots and is like, oh, one, I'm peculiar. Two, I can see the monsters. So that monster I saw was real, which is
This is
a
sort
big
of
moment.
a big moment. We find out this is what Miss Peregrine is kind of keeping from him. The
Hmm.
secret that nobody wants to tell him, which is just frustrating because I feel like she should have just led with that, you
Yeah.
know?
She
Like,
should have told him that. She should have told him how the time loop works, why they have to have the time loop. She should have told him all the stuff about the monsters first. Like she's like, I don't want to scare him away. Okay, do that on the second day, not the fifth day.
It does feel, and I understand it's because you have to have a whole book.
Hmm.
That's because we could get through a lot of the drama if she had just been honest about everything. But it is
Hmm.
frustrating. Like, I don't see any benefit really to keeping all this stuff from him. It's causing more problems. It just, that to me was irritating.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the next chapter, through this conversation, we get another like lore dump. So we have these monsters who are called the technically a hologast, and they essentially were created from the in the Imrans or the bird time travelers. Their brothers, who could not be the bird time travelers, wanted some power, and so to kind of make a concentrated power, they did this explosion that is essentially we could like a Chernobyl-esque situation, and that turned them into these hologasts who now crave the power of the Peculiars and the Imgrins. But then we also find out that these hologasts, when they don't get enough to eat, or is when they eat too much.
So I wrote that Hologast is a monster that was a wayward peculiar
Yes,
and then became the, I don't know, is it whites, wits?
the whites. Yeah.
Whites. Whites are hologasts that has fed on a lot of peculiars. So they fed
Yes.
on peculiars.
Yeah. So
Okay.
after the explosion, they turn into hologas, and then
Okay.
once the hologas eat enough peculiars, they turn into a white. Again, spelled in a weird Welsh way. Um, and
The
those can look like normal people.
okay, right. That's why I was trying to
Yeah.
remember which is which. The
Yeah.
hologasts are the scary ones
The
that he saw
monsters.
in the
Yeah.
woods potentially, and then the whites are the ones that look like people except for their eyes.
Their eyes. Yeah. Their eyes are like black or like grayed out almost.
It's like milky because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
remember the neighbor
Yes. 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 Yes.
that looked like he was blind.
Yes. Yeah. So we find all this out finally. We also find out that Victor left the loop because he was essentially going crazy due to the reliving the same day, and he was killed by the monsters. So that's how he ended up dying. Um, and as this is all happening, Miss Peregrine's mentor, what's her name? It's
Miss
Esmeralda.
Abbas,
Oh yes, 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 yes. It is it's Avocet.
yeah, Miss
Esmeralda
Abbas.
Avocet. Yeah.
Okay, yes,
She
yes.
yeah, so she arrives injured, and we get more lore dump. We find out that the reason why Jacob's grandpa went to America is because after he went and fought in World War II to kind of like to fight the Nazis, he didn't want to go back to the time loop. He wanted to kind of start over, and it was thought of that in America there was less hologas. And so a lot of peculiars immigrated over to America after World War II.
Kind of get both the backstory on those
Mhm.
creatures and we get the backstory on Abe.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
all at the same time. Yeah, yeah. And but Miss Avocet was baited by the Hologasts that she thought that they had stolen all of her peculiars that she was in charge of, but they hadn't, or they did kill them. It was like it's a lot
The
that happened there.
Yeah, so we find out though that they're not after the kids in this case. They're actually after the Imbrans. So they
Hmm.
got Miss Bunting. Yeah.
Yes, because we thought yeah, because they thought they were after the kids, but really they're after the Umbrans because of their power, we're assuming. Yeah. The kids are essentially put on lockdown, like they can't go anywhere. Miss Peregrine also wants Jacob to stay with them if possible, but she doesn't force him to at this point. Um, and then when Jacob goes back to his timeline, his dad's like starting to drink a lot because he feels lost again because his bird project is not going fully through. Um, or he doesn't think it will, like he's giving up again because apparently his dad has this like habit of starting a project and giving up before it even gets finished, let alone doesn't have a chance to succeed.
Like some of his motivation for going back, besides like, oh, I gotta go check on my dad, he realizes that he's maybe seen the whites.
Yes.
Right. So that's because the birder that came into town, he's like, oh, wait a minute. I think there was something about talking about strangers showing up, or there was some comment made that he's like, oh no, there was
Hmm.
a stranger that came to this island. That's suspicious. And
Hmm.
so I do think that was also some of his motivation. He's like, yeah, I need to go check on my dad.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then he also finds out that Martin, who works in the museum, has gone missing, but then he's found dead in the ocean, but he's also in like his like pajamas. And the townspeople are like, he would never leave the house in his pajamas. He's a stand-up man. And I'm like, not me going to Walmart in my pajamas.
Somehow I don't think they have a Walmart, but
That's fair. They probably don't.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and then we Jacob sees the birder is camping, which is weird to everyone, on this island, but also that he's wearing sunglasses at night. So Jacob was like, ding ding. Yeah.
Thinking like, oh, he's camping because he's a more hardcore
Oh
birder than I
yeah.
am. So he's like takes that personally, like I'm not as committed. But
Hmm.
then and he's like, yeah, and he's like super weird. He's wearing sunglasses at night. And then yeah, Jacob's like, wait a minute. Oh no.
Yeah. And so Jacob goes back to tell Miss Peregrine about this guy, and also this is where we find out about Jeffrey Dahmer being a holocaust. And I'm just
Or
like,
yeah.
yeah,
Is
okay.
he a hologast or is he a white feeding a hologast?
I think I said I wrote holocaust. I don't know, because
That's what I
like
was confused about because
y- eventually holocaust turn into whites. I'm pretty sure, right? Uh, I don't know. Either
okay.
way, he's eaten people because of this holocaust stuff.
So he's but he wouldn't be eating people, he'd be eating peculiars or
He'd be
both
eating
both.
peculiars, but they will eat both, which is
Right,
why
because of
the
the
stuff with the
blood.
sheep. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Like the
they can
bloody
survive off
steaks
that
and the
stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
This at this point is when Miss Peregrine doesn't let Jacob leave, but all the kids get together and make up a plan. And again, I know Miss Peregrine is overwhelmed, and now she has like her mentor she's healing, trying to get her back to health. But like if you're on lockdown, you gotta watch your kids better. Because like what, four of them go? It's
Yeah,
Emma,
it's
Enoch,
uh
the strong girl,
Bronwyn
Bronwyn,
Bronwyn.
yes, and Jacob. There's four
Fiona
of them.
Olive and Fiona help, but it's four of them that go out.
Yeah. So Martin's dead body is being held at the fishmonger's shop, which like what small town island things. Like, yeah,
Like I get
they
it.
got ice. Um, but their plan is to go there, have Enoch put a like living heart energy into him to ask him who killed him. And so it takes a while, but they end up getting there. And the descriptions here are like they just keep on going and going, right? And just lots of weird banter between all four of them. And Enoch's involved, so I'm not into it.
The whole thing's weird.
But they end up bringing Martin back to life, and Martin says the old man in the bog killed him, and then repeats that poem he had written about the bog man. And as he's like saying this, like Jacob's putting it together and he's like, I don't think it was the Bogman. I think he saw something else, but he just assumed it was the Bogman. And he thinks it was a hologas that he just, got confused about it all. And then suddenly the ornithologist appears, and starts switching accents. And this is where we find out this person was someone who was pretending to be the person that used to do the lawn care for Jacob's family. He is the neighbor of his grandpa that was supposedly blind. He is, then we find out, huh?
His bus driver.
His bus driver, yes, his bus driver. And then we find out it's his therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all those people his whole life following Jacob and his grandpa, but also they make a point for him being like, I do have a degree in psychology because I am interested in on the human psyche. And I'm like, guys,
Yeah, they're like, all of the stuff, like obviously this guy is super evil, but don't worry, he is qualified to be your therapist.
Yes.
So this isn't a
Ah,
malpractice thing.
yeah. Um, yeah, and so the Hologast is okay. Is he a Hologast or is he a white?
White, because it says that he's a white, so he looks like a person. And then so he leaves the kids with the hologast
Yeah,
because
okay.
they
Yes.
like provide food for the hologast is kind of the thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so they're dealing with this Hologast. They're able to escape it from Bronwyn smashing the house down, the fishmonger's house down, which like I hope they had good insurance because this is not going to reloop, you know? Or no security cameras. Like,
yeah, that's well, they're kind of making a mess of everything at this point.
mhm. They run towards back to the cairn. They decide to split up. And so Jacob and Emma hide with the sheep, which works for a little bit. But then the Hallgast finds them. Jacob runs towards the cairn, but falls because the monster's tongues are wrapping around his legs, and he ends up like chopping. He ends up killing it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he like
Oh, he
he
falls in the
suddenly
bog.
is yeah, he's suddenly brave
Yes.
and like has this moment where he's like, all right, I'm not like a scared little weak boy anymore. I'm a man.
And then yeah, because Emma rescues him out of the bog, and then they
Yeah,
kiss again.
yeah.
Why? Anyways, um, they make it back to with the other kids, but they find out that the White has taken Miss Peregrine and the other lady. They are running away towards the boat, and so the kids are like, okay, is he in this timeline or the other timeline? And they end up finding him at that the beach that Emma had taken Jacob to. And so we have this big like boat battle scene essentially where they're rowing out and then they're hiding behind parts of this shipwrecked warship and he's shooting at them. Oh, Miss Peregrine and the other bird are in bird form in cages. So they cannot do anything because they can't transform in a bird cage.
Joined us now because he followed the white
Yes.
down. So now
Yeah.
we also have Millard mixed in as well.
Yeah. And then a big U-boat comes out of nowhere and also has hologas on it um and that's where they're trying to take the birds and they end up are able to eventually rescue Miss Peregrine before the U-boat goes away. It's unclear if the other lady is captured or dead, I think, or I can't remember.
Yeah, the white slash Nazi, because right, the Nazi has the white eyes.
Yes, yes,
Okay, so the Nazi takes Miss Avocet, but they get Miss Peregrine. I think is what
yes,
happened there.
yes.
Yes. So Miss Avocet is taken by the whites, and then Miss
Yeah.
Peregrine is they get her back.
Yeah. So the kids have Miss Peregrine in bird form, but then they realize as they're like recovering from this like really long, kind of boring, in my opinion, battle scene.
On out.
Yes. And that's how I remember from the first time I read this. I was like, this boat scene is going on and on and on. But in my head, when I read this the first time, 10 years ago, I remember it as all on rowboats. But rereading this now, I was like, oh, there was warships involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they realize as they're recovering from everything, and also like Millard is bleeding, and so they're trying to bandage this invisible boy, that Miss Peregrine has not turned back into a human, and the loop did not reset because of everything. And they go back to the house and they see that half the house has been destroyed because the loop didn't get reset, so therefore it did get hit by a bomb. But the kids are safe because they're all on that beach. So if that boat battle didn't take place, they would have been killed because they would have been in the house. So like it's this weird, perfect, oh, this fixes everything question. I'm like, okay, okay, guy, whatever. And then they realize that the holocasts are trying to recreate the original explosion because they've figured out what went wrong the first time. So that's why they're collecting all the Imbrans to try to collect their power, to time loop that. And we get like at the very end, we get another lore dump. We're like, oh, there are time loops everywhere. Here's a magical map of all of them. And here's the oldest one. And it's just like, okay, okay. And so Jacob's like, I'm gonna go and help rescue. I'm gonna stay with you guys, right?
It's he's gonna stay. Well, and then, but they're also trying to figure out, I guess, the whole situation of like where, because they don't know where they need to go. But Horace has a dream, and then
Yes.
like gives them a sketch. I think that was
Yeah.
also kind of what, like, they had something they can act on.
Yeah. Before they go, Jacob goes back and talks with his dad. He goes to write him a letter, but then his dad comes in and yells at him for lying. But then Emma and Olive come in and talk to his dad and be like, knowing that they know his dad has seen their pictures. And this is how Jacob's dad's like, oh, you haven't been dreaming. The things my dad has been saying his whole life are real. The reason why he left me so many times as a kid wasn't for nothing. And he doesn't have a secret second family, like all this stuff. And his dad takes it way too well, I think.
Besides, he's like, "Oh, I'm dreaming.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
this isn't even real." He's like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds good." Anyhow, going back to bed, and he just
yeah,
thinks like, "Yeah, this is obviously a dream," which is
yeah.
kind of frustrating.
Yes. Very frustrating. And then they get on a rowboat and then that's how they leave is on a rowboat. And it's just a very infuriating um ending in my opinion.
They're like, "All right, let's wrap it up," and
Hmm. Yeah,
here
go
we
on to
go.
book two, which apparently book two starts literally where this book ends with them on a rowboat. This book, it's not bad by any reason. I like parts of it. I think the photo aspects are really fun, the forced at points. I don't like Jacob. I don't like the Jacob and Emma kissing thing. I find the time loop idea is super cool. The fact that the kids did not grow, weird.
I mean, I guess because it's like they're frozen in place on the day, but then it's not like, which, to be fair, it would be very uninteresting if their memory reset every day. Like, that
Yes.
wouldn't make for a very good story. It'd be pretty boring.
Yes. No.
So
It's yeah.
yeah, like in some ways, it's maybe the story is a little restricted with the photos,
Hmm.
but also that's where the inspiration came from, and it is cool. Like, I
Hmm.
do like that tie-in. I don't know as far as the overall plot, if like,
Yeah.
maybe it could be a slightly different book if it wasn't restrained by like, oh, we have these characters based on these photos. I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah. I'm also curious because I like the setting of this Welsh island. I like the setting a lot. I wish they spent more time in the actual like school aspect. Like I wish the kids were more than just like kids on summer holiday vibes, you know? And like I am interested in where the series goes. I am not going to finish the series. I will look on the Wikipedia pages.
Knowing how many books there are, I don't know. I did enjoy it both times that I've read this book. I did enjoy the book. I just
Hmm.
don't know if I enjoyed it so much that I want to go and read all of the
Yeah.
subsequent.
Yeah. I and then I think about this book came out like at the very late end of like the hipster craze. And like if you were any sort of angsty or hipstery like teen, this book probably like was everything for you. And I can see that. And I think that like that makes sense, you know?
Absolutely. Like, the actual physical book has this kind of old antique book vibe, and especially the photos, and it feels,
Hmm.
I think if I had read this when I was younger, if it existed when I was younger, I really would have liked it because I loved, like, as a kid, memoirs, biographies, historic kind of things. Those were my favorite
Hmm.
books. Which sounds very boring when I say that out loud. I don't know.
No,
But
I get it because I also like those books and like even like this book, parts of it reminds me so much of Outlander. Like obviously very different books, very different vibes, very different timelines, but like aspects of it, I'm like,
well, time travel, and you're on
yeah,
these, the islands, the British
mhm,
Isles, whatever. Like,
yeah,
Yeah,
and like
moody
the
weather.
the modern person like knows stuff. I think I would be curious of how much is Jacob when they go. I'm just curious about how the series goes. Like if they go to a different country, is he gonna suddenly know I learned this in high school about this historical event? You know what I mean? Like that's where I see this book going, and that infuriates me. But I also am curious if he does that.
We don't necessarily have that background that like, oh, he's, I mean, we know that he's maybe intelligent, but it's not like, oh, he studies, he's really into history, that's his thing,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which would make more sense. I mean, whereas like Outlander, maybe it's a little more believable, but
Hmm.
yeah, it is a little, I could see that. I mean, I guess we don't
Yeah.
know. We haven't read it, and we're
I
probably
haven't
not
read it.
going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to know some fun facts?
Let's go.
So, Ransom Riggs, the author, is married to a other middle grade author whose name is Tara Mafi, and I they got married in 2013. This was back when I was like in the booktube world and really into. Not that I'm not into the online bookish world, but this is my previous time of being into the bookish online world. And I remember when they posted their wedding photos, the world, like the bookish little corner of the internet, like exploded, like, what? They're married. Yeah. So I just was like, that's so fun. Um, Ransom Riggs obviously collects photos, like he talks about in the book. And this book, originally, he was going to make kind of a more nonfiction book about the photos he collected and the stories of how he found them and stuff. But then his editor was like, what if you made a novel based off these books? And he was like, okay. And that's what he did. He makes a lot of short films, like 6 minute little short films. Um, and he has them on his website. I watched one that was him because he also used to make book trailers for fun for folks. And so it's him going to Belgium and other places near Amsterdam with some urban explorers to old abandoned buildings to get footage and to create his own book trailer for this. So there's some really cool videos, and I really like his storytelling in those videos a lot. Like yeah, and I'll link that down below. And then lastly, Ransom Riggs went to Kenyon College and was besties with John Green in college.
Hey, there's a
Yeah,
community here.
yeah, community of nerdy authors. Who would have
Yeah.
thought? Yeah,
Huh. All
but
right, very cool.
what parts of you have you seen the movie? No.
I have not. So this is one where I actually
Yeah.
have read the book first.
Wow, that's so exciting. Um, I have not seen it either. I do know that Tim Burton directed it, which checks out for the vibe. Yeah. Um, what parts of this book do you hope are in it? Like, if they're not in it, you'll be bummed with a capital B.
I mean, of course, I'm very interested in the island and how they portray that because I have I mean, obviously, a lot of the imagery is very strong. And so I have this idea of what it's going to look like in my head.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if it's going to match or not, you know. So the island, the house, of course, like I'm really curious because we have some description of the house, but more so when it's dilapidated. So I'm
Hmm.
really interested to see what the house looks like in its prime. And then of course the kids, like those characters. Um, you know, I'm interested to see what like which kids are in there, if not all of them, like which ones are in there, and then how their like their powers are portrayed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I am also really interested in how they set the setting of I want to see bog, I want to see gray, I want to see rainy, I want to see a grumpy fisherman in a fisherman sweater. And I agree with the house too, because I have like different thoughts of how the house looks. And then I'm interested to see how much of them swimming under that boat is there. Not necessarily because I want to see that, because like we talked about, dangerous. But I'm curious to see how they do that.
I am just interested in what parts of the book will make it into the movie because obviously
Hmm.
stuff gets cut. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just how that goes. But I am interested in like how close they stick to that. I know I've heard things that don't make me feel very excited. So
Yes.
because, I know people that have read the book and watched the movie, and I think that's why I haven't watched the movie. So,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to go, I want to go in with an open mind.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. Me
Yes.
too.
It's a cool book. I don't normally read a lot of fiction. I
Mhm.
don't, for whatever reason, I'm more of a nonfiction girly. So yeah, as far as fiction, fantasy, that kind of stuff is generally not my area of interest. But I think because there's a historical tie-ins, I do like this one. And yeah, I know I especially would have really liked it if I'd read it in,
Yeah.
like middle school
Yeah.
for sure.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Delaney, for being on another episode. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Read the Book First Podcast and go check out our Patreon. I hope it's going well because it's in the future and I'm in the past. Kind of like this book. Wow. Follow the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Share it with your friends. Rate us 5 stars. If it's not 5 stars, don't worry about it. And remember, read the book first.